So last year, under Act 88, we put in $45 million for election integrity grants and funding for our counties. We saw all but 4 counties, I believe, actually applied for it. So 63 counties applied and got funding. Have you all done any, whether formal or anecdotally, any sort of surveying of those counties in terms of did they find having that additional money to be of value to them in last year's election?
We know from interacting with the counties as we do, and Deputy Secretary Marks has a weekly meeting with county administrators, how important those resources have been to administering elections in those counties. Those resources help pay for making sure that polling places are staffed, making sure that the necessary ballots and equipment are acquired, and all the rest. That grant program, as you know, is operated by DCED. So we interact with DCED about that program, and the counties report to DCED with what they've done with those taxpayer dollars.
Awesome, thank you. And so of the millions of votes that were cast last November, either in person or early by mail, were there any major alarming sort of red flags that you saw outside of the traditional, election day polls may open a little bit late or they may be run short on paper or something like that?
And you're right, you do see election after election, a lot of the same problems occurring over time. One problem that I am very mindful of that is worsening is the loss of experienced election administrators at the county level. Elections have changed a lot in the last few years. So many counties have new election systems, in-person voting on election day. Mail-in ballot voting is also very new and very complex for election administrators, not just to operate, but make sure it's interfacing with the in-person voting system so you don't have a vote being cast at a polling place and by mail by the same voter. So it's become much more complicated than it had been in the past. I think the election environment has changed a lot as well in terms of just sort of tension surrounding it. And we've lost a lot of election administrators throughout the Commonwealth. And I think it's important that we do what we can at Department of State to help provide resources to provide other guidance or training materials or anything else like that for them to rely on. Because with so many new people moving into these positions, it makes it more likely, with the loss of institutional memory, that mistakes will occur.
Awesome, thank you. So, I agree. Our poll workers are frontlines elections administrators and our first line of defense when it comes to our elections. So I'm grateful that you mentioned that. So it's good to hear millions of votes cast, not too many, any real major red flags. Our elections officials in our counties saw a net positive impact, and a lot of that had to do with the, actually funding our elections. So it's good to know that. I want to ask you a quick question about staffing. We know that in Pennsylvania we have an election basically every 6 months. And we know that once an election ends, you really don't have time to really rest on your laurels, and you got to prepare for the next one. Can you talk about the importance of, I know in your elections and commissions department, there's about 35% vacancy. Can you talk about the importance of hiring and filling those vacancies and being fully staffed, not just for the upcoming election in May or in November, but we are just about a year over from a major 2024 primary election, and actually having staff now to build that institutional knowledge that you mentioned can be invaluable to you all. So can you talk a little bit about the importance of having staff now in preparation for the upcoming elections?
Yes, sir. And you mentioned that it is a 365-day-a-year job. When I first became city commissioner, I remember being responsible for running elections in Philadelphia. I remember people saying, "What do you do the other 363 days of the year when you're not involved with elections?" But there's so much work that goes into running elections in preparation for them and after them, and preparing for the next one as well. We face vacancies in this department in elections, just as the counties do as well, and are working to fill those vacancies with experienced election or people with experience in the election space, or by their educational or other background. It's important that those things get addressed in
cycles like this one and the cycles in like 2025, presidential election years with higher turnout, higher activity, higher just work tempo, gives you very little time to do the sort of long-term structural human resources work that you need to do. So it's times like this that work is best done.
Thank you. And I just want to say I support you all's requests for funding. I would say that you can easily justify asking for more money, and I would be supportive of that as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.